The rain hadn't stopped since morning, and when we walked out of St. Matthew's Church, the low gray Charleston sky felt like it had soaked straight through me. My grandfather, Arthur Rowan, wasn't just family. He was the steady voice in a house that too often ran on sharp comments and long silences. The service was simple and respectful, full of neighbors and people he'd helped for years. My father, Malcolm, stood at the center taking condolences like a man shaking hands on election night. His grip was firm, his smile practiced. For a moment, I wondered if grief had softened him. It hadn't. Later, after the guests left and the room smelled like wet flowers, I sat in the estate's drawing room with a cooling coffee, staring at the oak mantel where Arthur used to lean and tell stories. Malcolm came in without the polite face he'd worn all day. "It's done," he said. "The transfer is official, $400 million in my name." He delivered it like a weather report, then let a small smile show. I nodded, not sure what answer he wanted. He didn't wait for one. "You're useless now." The words were too blunt to make sense at first. "Excuse me?" "You've coasted long enough," he said, his voice cutting. "Pack your things. Be gone by morning." My hands went numb. This was my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who lectured me about goals, staring at me like I was a chair he no longer needed. I stood up and straightened my back, even though my chest tightened. "Fine," I said. My voice didn't shake. I wouldn't give him that. I walked out, my footsteps echoing down the hall toward the bedroom that never really felt like mine. I grew up where silence was a control tactic. Malcolm's rules were exact. No slammed doors, no talking back, never question what he decided. My earliest memories are of corrections, back too curved, tone too blunt, dreams too big. By 10, I'd learned to keep good news to myself. If I brought home an A, he asked why it wasn't an A+. If I won a prize, he wondered if anyone serious had competed. Praise was rare, and when it came, it felt like a footnote, not a celebration. Arthur was different. Being around him felt like standing in sunlight after too long inside. He didn't push me to be perfect. He asked what I wanted and listened. Actually listened. When I was 15, I told him I wanted finance, to learn how money and power move. Malcolm scoffed and called it a man's world. Arthur smiled and told me to learn everything I could. Years later, when I got into a competitive grad program, Malcolm said it was a waste of time and money. I sat with Arthur on the porch that night with the acceptance letter in my lap, wondering if I should say no. He sipped sweet tea and slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a cashier's check that covered my first year. "Don't tell him," Arthur said. "This is between us. Think of it as an investment in someone worth it." That was belief that cost him something. Standing in my old bedroom with a half-packed suitcase, I thought of that look in his eyes. Malcolm could push me out of this house, but he couldn't tear out what Arthur built in me. I reached for another hanger, and something hard shifted behind the books on my shelf. The house felt changed within days of the funeral, like the warmth Arthur brought had vanished. Doors that were always open were locked. The library, the sunroom, even Arthur's little record-keeping study. Every knob rattled and stopped. Staff I'd known for years avoided my eyes. Margaret, the housekeeper who used to sneak me scones, offered short nods and kept her hands moving. When I asked what was going on, she muttered, "Mr. Rowan's instructions," and walked away. At dinner, Malcolm talked as if I weren't there, about moving forward, renovations, investments, cutting staff. It was clear I wasn't part of his plan. His voice had the tone of someone cutting dead weight. Back in my room, I tried to pack. My fingers ran along the spines of books I'd kept since high school, small safe places for my thoughts. One thick biography Arthur gave me on my 18th birthday slid out too easily. When I opened it, something solid shifted near the back. I found a sealed envelope tucked between the last pages. My name was on it in Arthur's careful handwriting. I sat on the bed and opened it. Slowly. Inside was a single sheet. The ink was faint, but sure. "The will protects those who protect others." No preface, no explanation, just one line, heavy enough to stop me. I read it twice, tracing each word. He hid this for me, not for Malcolm, not for anyone else. I slid the note into my bag, my mind already trying to figure out what he meant. Malcolm's study still smelled like cigars and polished leather, but the warmth was gone. He sat behind the wide desk, leaning back in Arthur's old chair as if it had always belonged to him. A half-full glass of bourbon caught the desk lamp. "Sit," he said without looking up. I stayed standing until he raised his eyes, a small smile tugging. "I assume you've heard," he said, as if the whole city weren't already buzzing. 400 million. All mine. No grief in his voice, only the calm of someone who had rigged the game. I stayed quiet and let him talk. "You've had a long, comfortable run here, Callista," he said, now colder. "But you're not a child. You're a financial drain. And frankly, you've been coasting." He wasn't sharing an opinion. He was handing down a sentence. I almost laughed. I'd worked since I was 16. I paid most of grad school with Arthur's help, not his. But arguing was shouting into wind. "Out by morning," he said, leaning forward. "No drama, no goodbyes. This is my house. I decide who belongs." He watched my face, waiting for panic. I felt Arthur's note against my thigh like a steady hand. The will protects those who protect others. I lifted my chin. Fine. No tremor, no pause. I turned and walked out. Upstairs, I finished packing into the worn leather suitcase Arthur gave me. I kept the envelope in my coat pocket like moving it might break the calm it gave me. When the grandfather clock struck 9, my bags were by the door. I didn't look back. I stepped into the cool Charleston night. By the next afternoon, I was hauling that suitcase up a narrow stairwell in a brick walk-up downtown. The apartment was small enough that I could spread my arms and almost touch both walls, but it was mine. No locked rooms, no eyes waiting for me to be wrong. I sold a few pieces of jewelry Malcolm had given me, glossy gifts without real meaning. It covered the deposit and first month's rent. My financial analyst job let me work from home, so I set up my laptop on the tiny kitchen table and kept my hours steady to keep my mind steady. At night, I'd take out Arthur's note and read those same 7 words again. The will protects those who protect others. It didn't sound like a throwaway line, and it didn't sound like something he meant for Malcolm. I started digging quietly. Public records, probate files, old news about strict estate clauses. Most of it was noise. Sometimes I found something that made my heart jump. Trusts that only paid out after certain tasks or community work. Wills tied to projects and partnerships. Arthur was careful with everything. It was possible, even likely, his will had the same sharp edges. 3 days after I moved in, an unknown number lit my phone. I almost let it ring out, but answered. "Callista Rowan." "This is Evelyn Cole," the voice said, calm, professional, with a thin line of humor under it. "Your grandfather's attorney. We should talk about his will. It's unusual." She sounded like she had more to say and would only say it face to face. I straightened in my chair. "How unusual?" She let out a short laugh. "Let's just say your father's week is about to get complicated. Can you come in tomorrow?" I looked at the envelope on my table. Yes. Evelyn's office had clean lines and quiet colors. No heavy wood, no fancy carpets, just order. She waved me into a chair and folded her hands, studying me like she already knew plenty. "I've been waiting for you to call," she said. "Your grandfather expected certain family patterns." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my father?" "Exactly," she said, pulling a thick binder closer. "Arthur placed everything into a trust. Malcolm can't touch a cent of the 400 million unless specific conditions are met." I leaned in, pulse quick. "What conditions?" She almost smiled. "He must complete a community redevelopment project that passes city review and meets Arthur's usual giving standards. And he must do it with you as co-executive. Equal authority, equal signatures." I sat back, trying to take it in. "So he can't do it without me?" "Correct," she said. "There's more. For the 12 months of the project, there Can be no lawsuits between you and Malcolm, no public break, and neither of you can quit. If any of that happens, the trust dissolves, and the money—" She flipped to the end of the clause. "Half goes to the charities Arthur named, and half goes directly to you." For a moment, all I heard was the soft hum of the air vent. I pictured Malcolm in the study, sure he'd already won, calling me useless. "He planned this," I said. "He wanted the person he trusted to protect the legacy." "Yes," Evelyn said, "and that person wasn't your father." I ran my finger along the desk edge. "When does he find out?" Evelyn's mouth tipped up. "He already has." Something in my chest settled, calm and cold. Then I should expect a knock soon. It didn't take long. Within 24 hours of meeting Evelyn, there was a hard knock on my apartment door. Malcolm stood there in an expensive suit with frayed edges, pale, a little sweaty at the hairline. "Callista," he said with a forced smile. "We should talk, family to family." I stepped aside. He scanned the small space, eyes catching on the second-hand furniture like it insulted him. "The bank says there's been a misunderstanding," he started, sitting on my small sofa. "Funds are stuck in some trust. Ridiculous red tape." He tried for casual, but strain leaked through. "It's not a misunderstanding," I said. "It's the will." He waved that away. "Your grandfather was sentimental. We can work around it." He leaned forward and softened his voice. "You and I, blood is blood. We've had our differences, but we can make this work for both of us." Arthur's words flashed in my mind. "Don't react. Negotiate." "What are you proposing?" I asked. "Sign whatever is needed so I can proceed. You'll get something." I held his gaze. "That's not how it's written." His smile thinned. "I'm offering you a painless path. You think you can run a multi-million-dollar project? You'll drag us both down." The threat sat under the words. I didn't move. "If you want the money," I said, "you follow the terms, all of them." His jaw jumped. For a second, I thought he might explode. Instead, he stood and straightened his jacket. "Think about it," he said, and walked out. I closed the door knowing I wouldn't have to. He'd be back. 2 days later, I had our agreement ready. Evelyn had helped me shape every line. Malcolm would publicly name me co-executive, cover my living costs during the project, and transfer 3 specific estate properties to me outright. No conditions, no takebacks. In Evelyn's conference room, I slid the pages toward him. He skimmed, then looked up. "You can't be serious." "Every word," I said. He leaned back and crossed his arms. "I'm not signing. This is extortion." "The will isn't giving you a choice," I said. "I'm offering a way forward." He stalled for a week, claimed he was too busy, sent pages back with red ink, even brought in another lawyer in a sharp suit. After one meeting, that man quietly confirmed the truth. Arthur's language was tight, and without me, the 400 million was out of reach. When Malcolm returned to Evelyn's office, he was quieter, not defeated, but carrying a weight. He picked up the pen, rolled it in his fingers, and signed each page with quick, hard strokes. Evelyn notarized the packet, her face calm, though I caught the smallest flash of satisfaction in her eyes. Malcolm shoved the documents toward me, knuckles white. "I hope you know what you're doing, Callista." "I do," I said, sliding the packet into my folder. We stood with all the unsaid things heavy in the air. He left without a handshake. For the first time in years, I felt the balance change, not just on paper, but in real control, and it was only the start. The waterfront lot was just cracked asphalt and weeds at the beginning. Arthur's plan imagined something living. Glass walls open to the harbor, classrooms for job training, and market space for local vendors on weekends. From week 1, I made it my job to know every detail. I walked the site with the foreman. Every morning, checked invoices at night, and kept close with the city officials whose signatures we needed. The more I showed up, the more the crews looked to me for calls. Malcolm hated it. He arrived late to meetings, pitched budget cuts that ignored code and Arthur's vision, and muttered that I was hard to work with whenever I refused. He couldn't lock me out. The will wouldn't let him. The press loved the headline, "Rowan family joins to honor patriarch's dream." They shot us smiling side by side. On glossy pages, we looked like a team. Off camera, every talk was a negotiation. By month 11, the steel was up and the glass caught the morning sun. Malcolm and I stood on the balcony watching the last supports go in. "You handled yourself better than I expected," he said, clipped but sincere. "Better than you wanted," I said. He gave a short, dry laugh. "Maybe." It wasn't trust or forgiveness. It was a small, grudging admission that I wasn't the problem he'd called me. A few weeks more, and we'd be done. The ribbon cutting filled the courtyard and spilled onto the sidewalk. City leaders, reporters, families from the neighborhood, all under a bright spring sky, the new center shining behind us. Malcolm stood to my left with careful hands and a smooth smile. Cameras love him, but the speeches weren't his. Arthur said that, and so did I. When it was my turn, I stepped to the mic. I talked about Arthur's belief that money means little if it doesn't lift others. I thanked the builders, the volunteers, and the people who stood with us. I didn't mention Malcolm. The applause started small and gathered into a warm, steady wave across the bricks. I saw Malcolm's jaw tighten as the focus stayed on me. By day's end, we had met every condition. Malcolm would get his fortune. I had 3 prime estate properties in my name, and the public credit for making Arthur's plan real. As the crowd thinned, I took the side path, heels tapping on new brick. Behind me, the center hummed with voices, exactly what Arthur pictured. I didn't look back at Malcolm. I didn't need to. I'd kept the part of the family legacy worth carrying and left the rest behind.